All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Black with No Chaser. We have another roundtable talk featuring the Melanated Mental Health Awareness team. You've seen them before. Excellent, excellent, beautiful minds, beautiful Black people who are here to help us get through this thing called life, as the proper one would say. Um, So tonight's talk is about microaggressions at work and beyond. Um, so it's something that I know a little bit about. I did a little reading and whatnot, but I'm not an expert, like I always tell you. But I got five wonderful people who are. Um, so before we get into that, I'm gonna let everybody do their thing and introduce themselves. But I want to start with our special guest, um, Dr. Ebony Butler, the creator of the My Therapy cards, the only therapy deck for women of color. She created it. She's out here, grinding. We need y'all support on this. So I'm gonna let her start.
Thank y'all so much. So I'm excited to be here. I've admired y'all and the work that y'all are doing for a while and follow y'all. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to get the conversation started. But I'm Dr. Ebony. I'm a licensed psychologist in Texas, and I'm also a food relationship strategist. So what I do on my psychology side of things is particularly work with women of color, mainly Black women, around trauma recovery and helping them thrive and get their voice back, assert themselves, learn how to communicate, ask what they want and need. My work initially started out being around recovering from sexual trauma, interpersonal trauma, trauma done at the hands of somebody else. But as I learned more and I saw more and I began to kind of just understand the mental health field in and of itself, I recognized that we weren't doing enough in racial trauma, and that's a real thing. And that really came to light moving to Austin. And a lot of racial trauma in the workplace, a lot of Black women in tech experiencing exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight. But a lot of things that were kind of targeted towards them because of them being Black in that space and being a woman in that space. So really beginning to work with people around owning their voice, kind of using their voice, being seen, making sure that they're heard, and asserting and encouraging them to do so. On the food relationship strategy side of things, I am working to disrupt my own conditioning of diet culture and disrupt what we believe as Black people about our bodies, as that is largely based within diet culture. And so my work with food relationship strategy stuff and online coaching is that I create programs to help people. The name of this, Taking Back My Body, because the diet culture has largely been created in opposition of the Black woman's body. And so if we think about dieting and thinking about how that all started, it was kind of so that we can adopt the it was so that we can adopt the European standard of beauty, which was thin white woman. And so now that we are in this kind of, I call it snatch culture, we all want this snatched waist, and I don't really know that we know what that's doing to us, and that is just us kind of aligning with the very culture that was created in opposition of us. So really kind of getting us to understand a lot about ourselves and really kind of learning more about how to stand in who we are. I'm not saying that we can't be healthy, but I'm also saying we don't have to chase a standard that was never meant for us. So that's what I do on that side of thing, and I'm having to do my own work too. And it's really hard to break away from a culture while you're still in it. Um, so so I created, if we kind of switch gears into my therapy cards, because I saw a need with access to services for Black people, especially Black women. Getting access to care, getting access to quality care is a huge issue. And we all know that insurance companies they're the gatekeepers for who can go to therapy and who can get paid for providing those services. And then when they reimburse you, those reimbursement rates are very slim, very low. They're not comparable to what you know and your experience at all. And then they're only for about 40 to 50 minutes. And we all know that you're seeing people way longer than that when you're filing and doing the paperwork and writing the notes and follow-up calls and all that stuff. So myself, I choose not to work with insurance companies because of that. And I know that my rates are still sometimes out of the price range for people who want to have access to a quality provider. That's the one hand of things. The other hand of things is when I got to Austin, I was the only Black psychologist practicing in Austin. And that is completely unacceptable. We have other mental health providers, therapists, but I was the only doctoral level person practicing. That is unacceptable. And when you go to places like Houston and Dallas, we're everywhere. But to have that kind of range of expertise in the mental health field just is not here, especially for the Black people who live here. And so I was like, well, this is just not okay, and everybody can't come see me. So I created the therapy cards as a way to, one, make access to care more accessible. And so that people who felt like, I don't really know if I want to go, because we all still know that there's a stigma around mental health and around getting treatment in the Black community. And so I wanted people to be able to say, hey, I want to do this work. I'm really skeptical. I don't really trust people, but I can still do some work on my own, and let me just gauge and see where I stand with some things. The other one was to create space where people could afford quality care. And these cards don't substitute by any means a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. However, I do pride myself on doing my work and making sure that I am labeling myself like I identify as a provider who really cares about the work that I do. And I do kind of consider myself a quality provider. So I wanted people to have access to questions created by somebody who's actually doing the work. I know that on social media, we have a lot of people who are doing like self-care and affirmations, and all of that stuff is great. But I don't really think that gets to the essence of the work that we need to do. And I wanted people to feel like, okay, this card deck is really going to help me do my work. It's not like I can still go get help and I can use this with my therapist and therapists can use it with their clients. But we're asking some really hard questions. It's not just all fluff like wake up in the morning and tell yourself you love you. It's no like, what do you need to forgive yourself for? Like, what are some things that you keep doing that you know you need to stop doing is no longer working? What are some things that you used to do that are no longer working? Those kinds of things. And what's getting in the way of you saying no to people? So asking those kinds of questions that we kind of need to be asking to uncover some of that stuff that's getting in our way and keeping us stuck. So I created the cards as a means to kind of help with those issues. And one thing, so this is how they look, right? So I wanted them to be quality too. I didn't want them to just be thrown together. I wanted them to look really presentable. So they come in a tin can, and it's about 54 cards in the deck. And so I have a framework that I work from that I think when we are kind of stuck, there are 3 areas that we kind of need to pay attention to, and that's our mindset, our habits, and our triggers, how we're responding to when we're triggered. And so the cards are broken down into those categories. So I have 12 cards that get at mindset issues, 12 that get at habits, and 12 that get at triggers and how you're responding and coping skills that you're using. So it's broken down into that. And the deck has a glossary that I think people know all of the terms that we use. And then there's a resource card that you can scan a QR code and it'll take you to my website that has additional resources. And then there's an emotion wheel, because if anybody grew up like me, we didn't really talk about emotions. And so there's pointing that out for us. So basically just providing a resource to people so that they feel like they can do work. And we're actually sold out of the first wave, and I had to reorder more. And so we have more coming because they did so well. So thank y'all for that platform to be able to share these and get the word out to people.
Dr. Ebony, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I know that we all know that Black women are often the least cared for population within our communities and basically in the world. And we're often traumatized. I know that trauma is a big thing that we're using to direct care now. And I think it's an interesting meld that you have this aspect that's teaching us to love our bodies and how to eat. How did your trauma-informed work lead you down that path, or how did you come about doing that kind of work?
It's kind of twofold, right? So my trauma work did lead me down that path because I worked with largely sexual abuse survivors or sexual assault survivors. And a large part of the work we were doing was around body acceptance, taking care of the body. And for some survivors, their story was, well, I stopped taking care of my body because if I'm unseen and I fade into the background, well, that's a protective factor. And so I don't want to take care of myself. I don't want to do that because then that makes me seen and that makes me desirable and that makes me a target. So it came out of that, like we want to be able to have you assert that you, just because you are desirable and attractive does not mean that you are, people are welcome to take advantage of you. So doing that work. And it also honestly came out of my own work around my own relationship with food and just kind of being somebody who grew up in a family where kind of like the the large body is something that most women in my family have. And then having my own toxic relationship with food and relearning how to engage with food again in my body from a place of acceptance and love versus diet culture, and just kind of seeing how that worked together, because I did start off like trying to teach people how to lose weight, and that was my first business model. But once I started reading and educating myself, I was like, I can't really get with people coming to me telling me they are beating themselves up because they didn't lose the 10 pounds that they thought they were going to lose. Like, that's super oppressive, and I don't want to be a part of that. So the more I learned, the more I started to rewrite my model, and I was like, I can't do that. So it was largely trauma informed and largely kind of built around understanding more about how systems work, how structural oppression works, and just learning more about my own self and recognizing that this thing is deep, is way mental, is way more mental than it is kind of discipline oriented or motivation or gym oriented. Like, this is deeply rooted, and we kind of need to do some work. If we're going to stand in who we want to be in, like take up space, we also got to stand in all of us, not waiting until our bodies look like somebody's in a magazine to say, I deserve to take up this space and I deserve to have a voice. And we shouldn't be shrinking behind that and pulling ourselves apart because of that. And so if we think about it, it's all really trauma, because all of us have been kind of shaped in this way, conditioned in this way, and kind of beat into oppression and submission. So all of us have learned to kind of talk negatively about our bodies and look at a fat body or a large body as bad, and they're ridiculed throughout society because of that.
I agree. I've heard all the jokes and all of that too growing up, so I completely understand that. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Ebony. She's the creator of the deck, My Therapy Cards. They will be available soon for you to buy them up again so she can sell out again. We want to help her sell out as many times as we possibly can.
They're available now. The first wave is going to go out mid-July. That's the shipping date. So anybody who orders from here on out, the shipping date is just the end of July. So I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't want the people coming from me in my email sending
Gotcha.
their cards.
see, play as fuck up. So listen, again, before we get into the microaggressions conversation, I want everybody to introduce themselves real quick, and then we can get into it.
I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Deshara Dobb. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Vision of Promise LLC, and I am out of Louisville, Kentucky.
Hey y'all, my name is Afia K. I am a licensed psychotherapist in Alabama, and I am also the owner of the Sunshine Haven Counseling Center.
Hi everyone, I am Adrienne Marshall, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist associate here in the Atlanta, Georgia area.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Calibri Jenkins. I am a psychiatrist. I'm currently more so involved in child and adolescent psychiatry, and I am the owner of Restore and Released coaching and consulting firm.
All right. Y'all know who I am, and I don't do none of this stuff that they do. So I'm here to learn just like everybody else. So the topic that we have, microaggressions at work and beyond, and it's something that, we deal every day. Now, I want y'all to kind of, break it down, as simply as you can for people watching and listening about, what a microaggression is and the different types of microaggressions. A lot of people hear that word and don't fully understand what it is, and some people might hear you guys talk and recognize something that they had happened to them but didn't know that's exactly, what it was. So I'm going to just sit back, take notes and pay attention. So the floor is yours, ladies.
So I'll go ahead and kind of get started and kind of give people a little simple definition. Of course, there's the standard definition. This term was brought about by Dr. Chester Pierce in the 1970s. He's worth looking up. Very, very interesting. I'm very surprised I didn't know about him before kind of doing my research on this. But microaggressions are simply defined as indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of marginalized groups. So I think that the thing that's really so toxic about microaggressions is what's really in name, which is micro. So you're looking at aggressions being acted out towards people of color that are so small and so subtle that sometimes you might not even know that they're actually happening. And when you do realize that they're happening, it kind of makes you kind of do a double take. Like you kind of, you do that double take where you're like, did I just hear what I thought I heard, or did that just really happen? Right? So it's really subtle. And then because it is subtle, it makes it a little bit difficult to sometimes take up for yourself in situations like that, because then the first question comes out that is like, maybe makes you think you're going a little crazy, or like I said, that you didn't hear what you thought that you heard. And so there are three types of microaggressions, right? There are micro assaults, there are micro insults, and micro invalidations. So those can be categorized by a lot of different examples. So for micro assaults, you're looking at very conscious acts where, say, for instance, somebody might hang a flag of a swastika, right? So that's a little bit more overt. And then you have your micro insults, where that's kind of used, it's like a verbal or nonverbal rudeness kind of used to demean a person of color and their heritage. So I would say like a micro insult might be something like, how did you get into this school? Does it have anything to do with a quota? Does it have anything to do with, affirmative action? So how you get those questions about, people of color and maybe how they got into certain spaces, what they're doing there, how they got certain jobs. So you can look at those as micro insults. And then lastly, you have your micro invalidations. So those are things that try to negate your experience as a person of color, that maybe you didn't really experience what you say that you're experiencing. So one famous one that we all know of is, like, for instance, when President Barack Obama was elected, and everybody kind of, made Black people, want to think or feel as if we were in a post-racial society. Hey, we have a Black president now, so we don't have any more racism. And so we know that is crazy, right? So that is a great example of a famous micro invalidation that I'm sure a lot of us have probably come into contact with. So yeah, those are just kind of some rough examples of what microaggressions are and who they were, who originated.
I think it's interesting that you brought up the thing with Barack Obama, because I think the most prevalent microaggression that we experience right now is the I don't see color statement. And I think that is probably the most disingenuous comment that I've heard, because studies have shown that the first thing that people see when they see a person is their color. So to say that you don't see color is a lie in and of itself. You're lying to yourself, because I think that these people genuinely believe that. But the first thing that you see about a person is their color. And I want non-people of color to understand that we don't want you to disregard our color. Our race has shaped who we are. Our race has shaped our experiences. It's given us, it's helped us color the world. So when you say that you don't see color, in essence, you are invalidating us. And I think that it's important that we understand that when you erase that color, you're erasing who I am. But it's also a way for non-people of color to assuage their guilt. They don't want to look at the fact that you colonized this country. You came over and you took this land from indigenous people. You enslaved kings and queens and warriors in Africa, and you brought them to this country to work for free for your, for white empowerment and white financial betterment. And if you can invalidate that, oh, we're all the same, we're one big happy family, then you don't have to deal with the guilt or acknowledge the issues that are going on. And I think once we understand that everybody comes into this place with biases. We all see color. If we understand that in order to see us fully as human and to see our fullness, that you have to actually accept and validate that we are people of color, and because of that we have certain experiences, then we'll be able to move past some of these microaggressions.
I think that's good, and I love the way that you broke down the 3 areas. And I think that, and I don't know if this question is going to come, but as we're talking about kind of experiencing that, I'm looking at us and all of our faces, and understand that as Black women, we kind of face this all the time. Like, are you sure you're really a psychiatrist? Are you sure you're really so you are the psychologist, and you're the therapist, and kind of those questions. Those are the micro things, like this questioning, this confusion about who they're seeing and about what you're saying, and asking you again, are you sure about it? As if you don't know who you are. And so those things tend to show up, and finding ourselves having to explain ourselves more in the workplace and in the professional space. All of those things are ways that we experience microaggressions just in our circle, this kind of community here.
And I think what's so interesting is, like I said, when I was doing the research on this, doing a lot of research on Dr. Chester Pierce, and the fact that he was a Harvard tenured Harvard medical professor. He was even a consultant for Sesame Street for a while. And very interesting person. And I got to thinking about, the courage that it had to have taken for him to kind of fight against, I'm sure, a whole lot of microaggressions that he was facing, being a doctor, being a Harvard, medical professor. I can't imagine what he must have come up against that pushed him to say, okay, you know what, this is a real thing. So much so that there needs to be a term that we're putting to these actions. And, he even pointed out he's quoted as saying that, every time you're faced with a microaggression, as Black people, we need to also take that opportunity to also call it out. So, I felt like, in kind of reading up on him, he was definitely speaking way ahead of his time, for his time and for our time too, right? Because this is something that in this day and age, we're definitely still dealing with.
One of the things I think is interesting about this concept is exactly what you just mentioned around the safety, because I think a lot of times people don't even feel safe to call it out. It's like you have to kind of teeter between, am I going to make this a teachable moment for the person that is, using these microaggressions against me? Would this possibly be some backlash? Would I possibly be dealing with, some subsequent issues within my classroom, within my workspace? And I think this inadvertent mask comes in, where we as Black people have to kind of decide how we're going to stand in our truth, right? And what ways do we have to potentially minimize our greatness for the comfort of other people to remain safe in our own spaces. And one of the things I think is so great with this panel is all of us have some type of business, right? So we all have experienced being in the workspace with people where we've had to kind of navigate this. I mean, we have 2 doctors, so I know without a shadow of a doubt that, at some point in time, whether it's with academia or whether it's within the professional space, that you all have had to deal with exactly what you just said, Dr. Ebony, where people are kind of questioning, like, are you the doctor? You sure? So I think this whole putting on the mask is also an oppressive piece when it comes to microaggressions, because then you have to decide, am I going to be who I am in its wholeness and in its authenticity? And then am I going to get home or get into a place where I am comfortable and safe and take this mask off and I'm triggered and I'm in pain and I feel oppressed? I don't know how to navigate. How am I going to deal with this situation? Because I think that that's another thing. We're all women on here. So this whole concept of except you, TK, I love you. But this whole idea of the angry Black woman, right? So the idea of, even if you're coming in a very sweet, very genuine way of trying to provide a teachable moment and not necessarily correct or try to embarrass, how the other person receives it can possibly result us having, punishable actions at work, dealing with additional microaggressions and things of that nature. So I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because I think that that's a really important piece when it comes to microaggressions. Is also talking about, that mask, that inadvertent mask that we also have to put on when we have to teeter the decision of if we're going to provide that teachable moment or if we're going to continue to essentially be oppressed in our workspaces.
I think it's important that we place the emphasis on how important it is to do the critical analysis of what you just said. Because when you're in a situation where you're dealing with microaggressions, whether that's at work, in your personal life, at your child's school, you have to weigh the risk and benefits. And that's unfortunate because we should be in a space where teachable moments are not viewed as aggression. They're not viewed as threatening, but they are. And because we still are in that place, we have to do the critical analysis to figure out, is my efforts to make this a teachable moment worth the loss of this friendship? Is me speaking up worth the possibility that I may be in a hostile work environment or even lose my job? Me speaking up at my child's school, is it worth the additional scrutiny that my child will then have to bear for me to educate the people on what they need to be doing and how their microaggressions are affecting me, my child, my relationships, whatever the case may be? Because if you really look at it, just as Adrienne said earlier, microaggressions are subtle. They make you question yourself. And sometimes people are so good at it that then it turns into a gaslighting situation. So you are particularly at a point where you are more vulnerable to the effects of microaggressions, and they pile up, and then you snap. So, we have to make sure that we are decompressing and having some self-care, going on with ourselves in the background, because if we don't, we run the risk of being jailed, being fired, being killed, because we have allowed these cumulative effects of these microaggressions to compound. So we have to be ready, to make those critical analyses about whether or not we need to address them. And if we don't address them, what are you then doing to alleviate, to woosah, to put those things in the correct compartments to be able to live your life in an effective way?
So I have a question. A couple of you talked about the teachable moment and how to deal with it at work. And it made me think about a situation that happened maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago in Gulfport, Mississippi. You had a young lady, I believe her name was Jamila Swopes, and they was having a conversation about George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and, she gave her point of view, and the doctor fired her. And, she's been protesting in front of the doctor's office and whatnot. So like my question is, and you said it yourself, Calibri, it shouldn't be a act shown as an act of aggression for, making a stance or saying your piece or whatever. It also should be a fireable offense. So how do you navigate that? What do you do to deal with that in the workplace? How do you you go from hearing the shit that happens and addressing it, or do you just walk off and let it go?
I think she kind of already answered as far as weighing the pros and the cons, but we have to do so in that moment. So as soon as something happens, one thing that we have to point out is that just because it's a microaggression doesn't mean that it has a small impact. Those things build up over time. They impact our mindset, how we do our job, whatever capacity we are, acting in as a parent, as a worker. So micro literally just means that it's subtle, but it continues to build up. So if you are in a situation where those things are continuing to build up, that's you weighing those pros and cons. Is this something that I need to address in this moment, or is this something that I can do self-care and I can go to therapy and I can decompress and work through these issues because I need my job? But I also think that there are ways that you can address it without, of course we can't decide how someone's going to perceive it, but there's a way to address it without it becoming so hostile or aggressive. So you make it a teachable moment. You say, what you said to me was offensive and this is why. Or those things hurt my feelings because of this. And so if you can try and explain those things, that's helpful. And then you have to then weigh, are they accepting what you're saying, or are they becoming more aggressive? Are they continuing to do microaggressions towards you? Are they continuing to become, defensive and hostile? And in that moment, you might have to take it up a notch. You might have to go to HR. You might have to seek out. One of the most important things as Black people and people of color is that we have to stand up for ourselves. And sometimes we can't do that by ourselves because they won't listen to us. That's why we have these microaggressions. So that's when you document all of your information. That's when you keep it on paper. That's when you go talk to your supervisors and your managers and your HR, and you keep it on file so that when something big like this happens, as it did to her, you have a tracking of these things that have occurred so that some change can start to happen. We have to make a change within our own environment because they're not going to make the change for us. So that's just one way.
The really sad part is just the fact that we even have to go through all this. As you were talking, I very much have grown into the person that is I call it the CYA. And because I don't know who's watching, I can't say what that actually means, but just look it up, but I think that it's really unfortunate because a lot of people in this position have to CYA everywhere they go. It's like, it doesn't have to be a professional setting. It could be just going to the grocery store, getting pulled over by the police. It's like you're always having to think 2-3 steps ahead, and then even sometimes put on this facade to do the yes ma'am, no sir, just to try to keep yourself safe and maintain. And I think that that's the exhausting part. And so I wanted to just lift that up really quick because I think that, as maturity happens, as experiences happen, a lot of people, the importance of documentation, the importance of recording what's going on. But a lot of people are in the place of like continuing to go to HR. They don't have the supervisor that they can go to and say, hey, I just needed to kind of let you know this. I'm not quite sure. It's like you have to play this game like you're not sure if this is actually an issue, but you wanted to just make somebody aware. And so I wanted to even just lift up how exhausting that is for people that look like us, and the fact that we always have to continue to do it. I just wonder, I always known that systems was not set up for us. I mean, I think that's how microaggressions have been able to kind of live and breathe the way that it has. But it's almost like, what is a way that you can try to pivot through that? Is it more of going outside of your space, whether that's your educational institution, your employer, or is there a safe space within those institutions? And I think that's one of the things that's kind of being lifted up right now in our country, is the ways in which employers and organizations are trying to, and I'm going to use this, shift systems or make changes, because we haven't seen that manifest itself completely, right? We just see that people are kind of, getting on the train of change, but a lot of people haven't put it into action. But I am definitely just wanted to lift up how exhausting that could potentially be as well.
So it's interesting that you bring it up, because you got to move back. In order for the burden to not be on people of color, you've got to move back to where microaggressions originate. And the responsibility is on, in this setting, we're talking about white people, but the responsibility is on the person who is in the majority at that time. When you think about it, microaggressions, in the definitions, it says that it's unintended. The reason that it's unintended is because those microaggressions come from our internal biases that we have against one another. And because those internal biases are deep rooted, it's very difficult to get people to recognize them, because we have been taught that racism is this horrible thing that somebody does. It is calling somebody a nigger, spitting on them, riding around with the Confederate flag. We don't talk about what racism really is, that it's an individual thing that is and systemic. But from the individual standpoint, it is not correcting people when they make racist jokes. It is continuing to uphold stereotypes. And because we don't talk about those things we talk about the tip of the iceberg. We don't talk about the iceberg that's under the water and how big that is. And because we have not put that bigness on display for people, when you call out a microaggression or you say there's work that you need to do, they automatically think that they are in that tip of the iceberg part where it's this horrible person committed this horrible atrocity. And because we have not been able to really deal with where these microaggressions come from, white people, in the context that we're talking about right now, have not been willing to do the work because they feel offended when we tell them that what they have done, what they have said is offensive. So until white people do the work, read the book White Fragility and understand where that's coming from, understand what all of that is about. And until white people decide that they want to do the work, we will continue to have these issues until they are willing to listen and be open-minded and then apologize. And apologize from a standpoint that is not about them. Don't make the victim feel guilty for calling you out. So I think that the work has to be done from the perspective of the white person or the person who's in the majority or the person who's holding the bias. They have to do the work. And it does not need to be the work that Black people, brown people have to continue to do to help you understand.
I was going to mention that, Calibri, about the book, The White Fragility, right? It talks so much about how we are typically conditioned to soothe white guilt. And we do that by walking on eggshells, like trying not to be the angry Black woman. Like we're walking around, hey, how you doing? And we're always in the moment trying to appear soft. We're always in the moment trying to appear approachable because we know that there's a stereotype that we already come with just because, right? And we all kind of fit that stereotype right now because we all have a voice, right? And anybody who is kind of operating in racism and operating in their white fragility will say that we are being aggressive because we are speaking out. And not speaking out actually continues to reinforce this idea that we don't have a voice and that it continues to reinforce the stereotypes, basically. And what you were saying, Dashara, is completely exhausting for us to have to always do the work of making sure that the environment is safe enough for us. It's really exhausting to always be walking on eggshells. So I'm really glad, Calibri, that you brought up the point of this is not just about us. The system needs to do the work. The majority in that moment needs to do the work. And this doesn't always rest on us. And I think that something that we can do from the outset going forward is that don't make it a space where that is acceptable. So we're not going to laugh at you touching my hair. We're not going to make it a joke, and we're not going to say, oh, she's just being funny. Because what we do then is we set the precedence. We set the expectation that this is okay until we're fed up with it. And then people are like, well, wait, it wasn't a problem before. Why is it a problem now? It's because we're trying to navigate stereotypes and because we're trying to appear soft and because we're trying to keep our jobs, we have allowed certain things in our space that really we kind of have made acceptable that really aren't. And that is not the fault of the individual because you're operating out of a space of safety. And when you're in survival mode, you don't make the most rational decisions. So we're always, if we going forward can think a little bit more rationally, like, maybe I'm not going to laugh at that. I'm going to tell you that that's not appropriate. And I'm not going to wait until I'm at a level 10 angry to tell you that's not appropriate. I'm going to tell you when I'm at a level 3 angry that that's not appropriate because that may make the relationship a little better, the dynamics a little more easy to navigate instead of me being at a 10 and now I'm cursing everybody out within here. And, those kinds of things. So I think that we already, as Black women, have to deal with and carry so much that this is yet another thing that we have to learn how to navigate. And this is burdensome sometimes, and people sometimes can really feel that weight and really not even want to do that work and just allow things to go. But we can't afford to do that, especially not right now.
I'm going to add to that, Dr. Ebony, both what you and Dr. Calibri were both saying. And I think it's important to understand and to know that, we're even though, we're talking about this in a professional manner, we're not out of touch. We understand that even though, you might be dealing with some microaggressions at work, everybody can't, like we talked about before, can't just go to HR or you can't just quit your job. And on top of that, it can be exhausting, right? To try to be the person that's educating white people on what to say, what's not the right thing to say, that sort of thing. But I think it's also important to kind of just really have some real conversations with yourself about the fact that a lot of times when microaggressions are happening, they're not always unconscious. Sometimes they are very conscious. And when that's happening, it's like if they are conscious and they are doing these things purposely, then that ball is in your court to kind of decide, you know, is this the right environment for me? How long can I do this and work within a system that is working against me, that is hostile and aggressive towards me? You know, how long can I do this? And what are some plans that I need to make for myself? And that's a real question. It might not be an easy question to answer, and it might take some time to formulate some plans. Maybe if you know, are wanted to make a move to a different agency or different companies and that sort of thing. But it's a very real question to ask because, and the reason why it's important is because if a person is consciously, doing these microaggressions in the workplace, then it sort of puts you into a corner where you really don't have a choice but to kind of deal with it if you know for a fact that if you report it, you're not going to, that nothing is going to happen. You know, if you have the type of HR department where, you know, there's not a whole lot of leeway that's being gained and being made for you, then, you know, like I said, you really have to kind of ask those questions. And I'll bring up just even a personal experience of a very clear microaggression that I experienced. I was working for a very well-known agency a few years back in the central Mississippi area. And it became a point where I knew after working there maybe for 6 months that, hey, this is not going to work. You know, that there were things happening by the white immediate supervisor that I had, things that were being said, the attitudes, things that were being done that I knew was not going to work long term. And so I was blessed to be able to find something else, and I made the decision, obviously, to leave. And so I'd stayed late and was wrapping up, you know, getting ready to clock out. And it's a big building, and it was getting dark. And I said to this supervisor, this lady, I, you know, genuinely said to her, I said, you know, be careful. And I said that because she was going to be the last person in the building. She was going to be by herself. And so she very clearly states to me, she said, aren't you going to work in Jackson, which is a predominantly black city in Mississippi? And I said, yes. She said, well, you're the one that needs to be careful. And so, and I knew what she meant. And at that moment, it confirmed to me that I was making the right decision, that the work that I had put in to try to make my move was necessary for my mental health, right, for my job performance and everything. And there has to come a time where you really have to make that decision about, okay, what does my next move need to be based on whether or not this situation can be handled appropriately.
And I just want to bring up one other thing. You know, we're talking about being able to make moves or weighing whether you should or should not, you know, speak up when microaggressions occur. I think it's important to validate that sometimes people feel ashamed, they feel weak, they feel like they've been a sellout when they do not address these microaggressions immediately and on the spot. And I just want to remind everybody that does not make you weak. Strength is knowing how to live to see another day, knowing how to be able to provide for your family for the next year. So sometimes it is not always, that ability to make those moves is not always there. And we as Black people have survived because we do understand that weakness that strength and bravery are sometimes exhibited by our abilities to do just that, survive to the next day.
So, while you guys were talking, we had somebody in the comment, Jasmine Dickens, thank you for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. She made a statement that said microaggressions and stereotypes set the foundation for hate crimes and blatant racism and hate. And I agree with that. I've seen, places I've worked where they just make these assumptions of me because, you know, I'm a big bald-headed black dude, and they feel like just my mere presence alone is problematic. Like I walked down the street and seen, you know, women clutch their purses, or, you know, guys check their wallets, and, you know, I'd be like, motherfucker, I make more than you. I ain't got to steal from you, you know. But you know, we see these types of things, and it used to bother me. I think as I've gotten older, I just ignore, you know, the shit for the most part. But, you know, just like, just talking to you guys, listen to you guys talk, I see so much of myself and things that have happened to me in everything that you guys are saying. And I think that's one of the reasons why we needed to have this talk, because so many people see themselves in everything that you're saying as well.
You know, it's interesting because I was sitting here thinking about where we all are in the country, and all of us are like down south. So I feel like I also have to lift up, this is not even just a Southern issue, or not those places that people automatically think are like people are waving Confederate flags, and, you know, the KKK is walking the streets still and they burning crosses. Like, I think a lot of times when the conversations are had around like when you say the R word, like when you say racism, like period. And they're like, well, no, you know, we have these diversity and equity programs. You know, we have a black so-and-so, you know. And so I even want to lift up too, because I know that there's a lot of people that are joining us across many areas of the country. Don't just think that this is a Southern issue. You know, a lot of people have lived up north, and it's been real bad. Okay, they've lived on the West Coast, the East Coast. Yeah, it can look different because, you know, the economics is different, or the culture of the place is different, but it all fits in the same way. And I think all of us kind of, how what everybody has been saying, have to evaluate and not second guess themselves. If you feel deep down inside, if you're in an experience and you like, whoa, like in your gut, you're like, this is not okay, like, know that you don't have to second guess yourself any further. And I think that because we're in kind of this time, and I think we've been in this time for a long time, I just think that cameras is kind of catching things, right? Things are getting on social media. But I think one of the things that plagues a lot of people in our community is the fact that we always have to second guess ourselves. Like, you know, we always get kind of like what you were mentioning, Calibri, about the gaslighting. You know, we kind of be like, well, am I sure that that's exactly what they were trying to say, you know? And so I think that that's one thing that we can do to speak truth to power within ourselves, is recognize, like, this is our experience and our experiences are valid, and we don't have to continue to keep second guessing our experience because this might not be the experience of our counterpart. And one of the things I wanted to mention about the commenter is, you know, I think a lot of times that people automatically assume that microaggressions just will come from somebody that don't look like you. I think, unfortunately, there are some people that look like you that feels like that in order for them to be safe in spaces, they have to do the same thing that someone else is doing. So, like, for example, you might see someone that's, you know, brown or black like you, and they having the same lingo, the same, you know, commentary as someone that has made blatant oppressive comments towards you, but they think they have to do that to fit in, or they feel like they have to do that in order to get to the next level in their role. And I'm sure all of us have seen that person, you know, or experienced that person that feel like that they have to, you know, do the kowtow and shuck and jive, you know, in order for them to get ahead. And I think that we see a lot of that, unfortunately, within this political race. But I think the other part is, within people that have some type of consciousness and some type of awareness, I think that's also really important for us to be able to navigate too. We always assume that it's people that are white or in the majority, but I think that it also has to be a layer too of those that look like us, that feel like that the only way that they can be able to navigate in spaces is for them to act the same, and for them to oppress someone else or have this crab in a barrel mentality in order for them to get ahead too. So I just wanted to make mention of that.
So it's interesting you brought that up, because we had a follower on our page, you know, kind of asked that same thing. You know, she talked about, she said, you know, and I read what she said. She said, FYI, I'm a black woman And the majority of my microaggression experiences have come from other Black women. Like, as Black women, how do you all, handle that? Because, I'm pretty sure our approach with our own is different from how we would approach, non-Black people. Like, how do you deal with that as one Black woman to another?
Jashira was saying that it's a crab in a barrel mentality, and sometimes that's what it is. It really is. We can't both excel, but I want to bring to light that sometimes it's internal biases as well. We have certain things that we think about certain people of color who come from certain areas of town, who come with a certain level of education, who carry themselves a certain way. We have our own biases within our own communities. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge those and to validate those experiences. I think that we really are dealing with biases that we have. And I want to say that it's more so biases than crabs in a barrel, even though those really do exist. But once we start to do the work and we check ourselves about why is it that we feel that the person who speaks in Ebonics is less than? Why is it that we feel that the gentleman walking down the street with baggy pants is an idiot and that he's not smart? Because my friends who are attorneys, when they get off work, they put on a white beater and basketball shorts and Jordan. They look just like that guy. So the question is, when is it time for us to check out time? What I am thinking is incorrect. What I am doing is wrong, because I think it's all rooted in these preconceived notions or ideas that we have about one another.
Go ahead, Adrian.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to just kind of back that up to say that when we think about that, we also have to think about those mechanisms that we use, like we talked about earlier, for survival. So Black people, have traditionally been made to believe that, hey, if we talk a certain way, that's white adjacent, right? Or we dress like they tell us to dress, or if our bodies, like Dr. Ebony was talking about in her work, look like this white European, model of what a body is supposed to look like, then it's appropriate and it's right and it's good and it's proper. And so then all that gets internalized, and it has been internalized. So anytime, we face someone who doesn't look like us, or who doesn't think in the way that we think that they should, or dress in the way that we think that they should, then we call it out as something that shouldn't be. I mean, probably one of the most famous movements where we probably really experienced that was Black women and us embracing our natural hair. We grew up, under a lot of women, who was like, you had to get that perm, or, you had to get your hair straightened, especially before church on Sundays. And it's like, if it's natural, you got your, the way it's naturally growing out of your head, the way God made it, then it's like it's not good enough, or it's nappy, or it's all these negative things, because it's we have bought into this as Black people, this white is right type of mindset.
That's exactly what I was going to say, and I'm sitting here and I don't have the answer to this, but I'm wondering, like, is this a survival skill? Am I looking at you? So if I don't look like you, then I'm safe. If I don't talk like that, then I'm safe. Well, girl, my hair don't look like that, so I'm safe. So basically, we're kind of scanning our environments all at the same time. Like, is that me? Do I look like that? No, I'm good. Do I wear my pants baggy? No, I'm good. Like, we're basically trying to kind of just feel where we are so that we can basically have some control and some grounding as to kind of survive. And so we recognize that we're not a threat. And we can actually breathe, right? Because if we feel like we look like somebody who looks like a threat, then guess what? We're not safe. So that's what I'm just wondering, like, I never thought about it that way until I'm just listening to the conversation. And I wonder if all of this kind of ways that we talk down to each other, because we do it to each other all the time. Oh, she thinks she's cute. Or she thinks her hair is cute. Like, that insecurity, those microaggressions, like, those things that you may see in the workplace where we talk about kind of people who look like us sometimes can be the ones who give us the roughest time. Like just thinking about where is that coming from? And so for me, the way that I handle it, I kind of really have learned, and this is just by mere growth and thank God for growth, that I don't take it personally. Back then, I used to take it very personally because I wanted everybody to like me because I was looking for validation. And I think a lot of us are looking for validation because we're not largely validated. Many of us aren't validated in our families of origin, and we're really not validated in society. So we're always looking for ways that kind of solidify our place in this world and kind of really let us know that we're being seen. And so I would take it personally. It's like, oh, that person doesn't like me. I really want this person to like me because I really wanted that validation. And now that I'm past that, you know, and I think we all want people to like us at some level, but I really do think that now I look at it like that's your problem. Like that's a problem that you're struggling with. That's your issue. You feel insecure. And it's only because of the work that I do and the growth that I've kind of gotten to this point that I'm able to recognize it. Everybody's not able to do that. And so it does hurt. It does feel like a high level betrayal when somebody's doing it to you who actually looks like you.
I think that's quite insightful. I think thinking about it from a perspective of trauma and am I safe? How do I protect me? I think that's a great way to look at it because I can see that coming from those spaces. If that person is perceived as a threat and I look like that person, then I'm not safe either. So I need to point that out to make sure that everybody knows that I am not like that particular person.
So I kind of wanted to pivot the conversation a little bit. You know, three of you guys, ladies, talked about your hair, you know, mentioned your hair. And it made me think about my daughter. I have a 8-year-old daughter. And I can't recall how many times she has come home, you know, telling her mother, you know, from school about somebody touching her hair. She hates to be touched anyways, but she really hates when somebody touches her hair. And at first I was thinking, you know, it's kids, but it's actually adults. And like, you know, again, like my wife has offered plenty of folks, you know, a chance to go 3-4 rounds, you know, fighting. And that situation is no different. So, and you know, the title is Microaggressions at Work and Beyond, where I want to talk about beyond. I want to talk about children because, you know, we can't forget about Black children in these conversations because they go through the same shit that we go through. I think it's worse because they're not equipped to handle it. So, and I know, Calibri, you deal with a lot. In Adrian, you do family counseling. So, like, how can we help our children these types of microaggressions and things of that nature to help them, you know, make it?
Let's talk about the hair thing first, because that's not just the children. That's all of us. And I think it's amazing that everybody on this panel has natural hair. I think that is absolutely amazing. But the one people understand is when you touch my hair, you have invaded my personal space. That's inappropriate on every level. But when you touch my hair, you touch something sacred. Hair is not just hair to Black women. Hair it's real. Do not touch my hair. I want people to just do not touch a Black woman's hair. It's inappropriate. It's assault. And it should be viewed as such. It's assault. And I think that people need to understand that we are not some exotic caged animal. And we are not here for you to marvel at, and you touching us is satisfying a sense of curiosity. That's not what I'm here for. Go to the zoo if you want to do that. Find a petting zoo and get that out there. But when you touch a Black woman's hair, a Black child's hair in particular, you should not be touching anybody's child, period. But to touch a Black child and a Black child's hair will cause a mom to turn into a beast. And I think that people just need to understand that. Do not touch my hair and do not touch my child's hair. It's assault. And if I could put you in jail for touching my hair, I would. I just feel that strongly about it. The other thing is that children go through the same things that we go through. Their job is school. So children are oftentimes the recipient of microaggressions at school, not only from their peers, but from their teachers. When teachers refuse to learn how to pronounce a child's name correctly, it invalidates them. When teachers view the way a child speaks, whether that's African American vernacular or whether that is with whatever accent from their native land, when they invalidate that, that's a microaggression. When you tell a child who voices, oh, I want to be a doctor when I grow up, when you say, oh, that's too hard for you, have you ever thought about nursing? Or maybe you could be a nurse practitioner. They make lots of money too. For a child who's already not having the visual of the person who does what they want to do, who may not know the ins and outs of getting onto the career path, for you as an adult in that child's life to say, oh, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you can't do that, that causes irreparable harm. I think the other thing is when we don't use the correct pronouns for children. That's something that goes on right now, and I think it's running rampant. When a child tells you, I want to be referred to as he and him, and you call her a girl, then that's a problem. When you don't acknowledge or follow through with the things that they have told you, I think that those are things that adults and teachers in the room do frequently, and they don't necessarily think about it. When you assign, I can remember vividly in Texas, there were assignments where children had to pick the role as slave or slave master. Who does that? Why would anybody think that that's okay? So I think that when we stand in a position of authority and we do not acknowledge and celebrate the differences in the room, I think that we do our children a disservice. And again, just like those microaggressions accumulate for adults, they accumulate for children. And more so for children because you are tearing at self-esteem that is trying to be built in the moment. We for most of us, we've got a certain level of self-esteem and we can withstand a little more. But when you're dealing with young people, you have to really look at what you're doing because you're causing irreparable damage.
I think just to follow up with that, with children, too, we teach them things, right, about like their bodies, their private areas, where no one is supposed to touch, right? And I think we don't just need to include private areas, right, of their bodies, but also, like their heads or their hair or anywhere that you're not comfortable being is valid and it matters. And I think that teaching your kids to be able to advocate for themselves and to be able to verbally say, hey, could you please not touch me there? Or I'm not comfortable with that, and making that be known. And I think once they're taught that and they've told their teachers that or they've told their peers that, and then once they come back home and they say, hey, I made this known and, I let them know I didn't want to be touched, but I'm still being touched. And I think that's a fight that you as a parent, then, you have to take up. And I think part of building that self-esteem, a big thing, like I said, is just teaching them to be able to advocate for themselves, what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with, because that also builds the foundation with them being able to learn their relationship with the word no, how to say no when they're not comfortable with something. Like all of these are just layers and foundations that you're building in children. So it's just really, really good to teach them these things early and to teach them to become comfortable with the uncomfortable that sometimes goes along with taking up for yourself. Because if it's something that you've never learned to do, it can be an intimidating thing. You have to build up that courage just to say, hey, I matter. My feelings matter. Don't touch me here. Don't say these types of things to me. And if we as adults know how much courage it takes for us, then to me that should indicate how important it is to start building that foundation with your children.
One of the things I wanted to add really quickly, because I work in a school, is that I want parents to know that you have the agency to protect your child. So if your child comes home and says that someone has touched me. Of course, as a parent, I think all of us kind of get that feeling riled up in us, like we want to fight, we want to do what we need to do. Get all the information that's needed. Ask who the people are. And especially if it's a teacher, just like all of us have mentioned in some type of sorts, that sometimes even the agency as an adult to speak to another adult to educate them or incite them that they are doing something that's inappropriate. Imagine a child to an authority figure, especially in our community. We are always teaching our children, respect authority, respect your elders, respect your. And so I would say, even as a parent, do not fear calling the principal. If you feel like the principal is not going to do what they're supposed to do not fear calling your school board member. Do not fear going whatever levels you need to, because I think one of the issues that I have even witnessed, and I've talked to a lot of families about, is the fact that they feel like that exactly what was mentioned earlier, the possible repercussions that their child will go through if they report. So, children have to get through school, right? You need the education to get the job, to move on with life. And then if you're already being stigmatized from whatever biases that teacher has, or whatever systems have been created that is causing Black children particularly not to be able to succeed, I think that could be really important. But I would tell parents, and I know all of us are working. I know a lot of us are just trying to make it to keep a roof over our head and food on our family's table. But please know that sometimes it's going to take for you to take that time off of work, or to go into work late, or to make that phone call, because I think that a lot of systems expect for us to be quiet, right? Like they expect for us not to go through the formal processes. We as a community, a lot of times, and I'll just go ahead and say it, a lot of us do the parking lot conversation, right? A lot of us will go to our friend or someone that we're comfortable with, and we'll talk about what issues we're having. But in terms of going through formalized processes, a lot of times people believe that because we have been oppressed and suppressed from systems, a lot of people are scared to go through formal processes of calling principals or calling the teacher directly, going to the parent-teacher conference or whatever. So one of the things I would definitely recommend as well is, when your child, first of all, create that system that your child can even come to you, right? Because a lot of times, there could be some fear even with that kid of telling their parent that something is going on, but, definitely create that safety at home. But when your child does do something, first of all, validate them. Validate that absolutely that was inappropriate. Absolutely they shouldn't have touched you there. And I think when we talk about good and bad touch, a lot of times we're talking about private parts, and maybe not necessarily our face or our hair, or holding people's hands or hugging people and things of that nature. But I think also as parents and as the village, definitely feel like that you have that agency to call that teacher. If you feel like that teacher is going to demonstrate some microaggression with you on the phone or in your face, and say, oh, that wasn't my intention. Oh, they took it the wrong way, because that is also a microaggression. Definitely feel like you have the agency to take it to the next level.
This conversation about touching people, in places that are not welcomed, especially kids, brings up something for me that used to happen for me when I was in elementary. Like I used to get in trouble by this one teacher all the time. She was a Black lady. And she used to always call me in the hallway. She said, come here. And then she'd take her finger and she literally rubbed her finger down my face like this. And then I asked her, what are you doing? She was like, does your mom know you have on makeup? And I was like, what are you talking about? She used to rub my face every day. And finally, my mom had to go tell her, like, she's not wearing makeup. I don't know. What are you doing? And so I had no agency at that time to recognize that she was, like, I had no awareness to recognize that she was actually touching me and violating my personal space, because she just, like, literally took her finger and ran it down my face, and that's inappropriate. And as I think about it now, it's like, I wish somebody would do my child's face like that, and it's inappropriate. And I think that we have to do a better job as adults who are kind of teaching and working with these little people, of knowing what our boundaries are. And just because we are the authority figure does not mean that we get a chance to violate a little person's boundaries and kind of tell them that they don't know what they're talking about, or that they don't kind of know what's going on. And I appreciate this conversation, and I love the framing of that's the child's job, is to go to school, and we can't be violating them in their workplace either. And I think that the adult has to get comfortable with sitting on their hands and not acting on their urges to violate somebody's boundaries just because they feel like that person does not have any say-so. And because sometimes it's us, it's the adults who can't sit with the urge to kind of want to, let me touch it, let me feel, let me tell you how I see you. And I just really love Dr. Calibri, that you brought up the gender thing and the identity thing, because we as adults love to tell people, especially little people, who they are and what they are, and we don't recognize that those are microaggressions. Oh, you don't know yet. You don't know yourself yet. So until you're able to know yourself, I'm just going to call you by your name that you were given. And the child is asking to be called another name or asking to be referred to by another pronoun. And because of our own discomfort, and it always comes back to our own stuff, we're telling them, no, I'm going to call you what I want to call you. And that's no different than us being at work and saying, you know what? I know your mom named you Ebony, but I'm going to call you Emily because that's easier for me to say. That's the same thing. That's the same thing, but we don't recognize it as such because, one, we got our own hangups about gender identity and the LGBTQ plus community, and we don't recognize that little people have boundaries and they have advocacy and voice over what they want in their lives, and it's their lives, and we as adults need to understand and recognize that boundary as such.
And I just want to quick say that gender identity is laid down by 3. So to tell a child that they don't know what they're talking about is completely incorrect, because by 3, a child knows whether or not they're a boy or a girl. So to say that is just completely outside of what we know to be true. The other thing that I wanted to point out is for any allies who may be watching, talk to your children about what microaggressions are. Ask them, what do you think about Black people? What do you think about Hispanic people? And I think Hispanic is not a right term, but what do you think about, all of these people, the Asian community, and see if they're feeding you stereotypes. If they're feeding you stereotypes that, Asians are they're really good in math, or if you have someone who says, well, I wonder if if her parents have their papers. That's a microaggression, because you should not be assuming that because somebody is Latina that they do not have their papers. So you need to talk to your children about what they think about different people within our community as a whole. And when they spit out stereotypes, then you have to check yourself, because what your children think at young ages is 9 times out of 10 based on what you have presented to them. So it is up to you to be an example. Walk the walk. If you don't want your children to be biased and have these outdated opinions of people, then you cannot show them those opinions. And when those opinions are exhibited around you, you have to check them. You have to check them. Again, this is not the work of the oppressed. If the oppressed could free themselves, we would be free by now. So the work is, it's incumbent that the people who are doing the oppressing do the work. So if you don't want your children to behave in this kind of way, or you want to be baffled when someone accuses them of being this way, you have to have looked at yourself and done the work yourself in order to say, well, I know I've done what I needed to do. Jack, where are you getting these ideas from?
So, we can talk about this like all night, because you all know so much, man, and how deep this conversation could go. We could be here until the kids are grown, actually. And again, I appreciate each and every one of you for doing this. Dr. Ebony, I appreciate you coming through. The floor is yours anytime you want to stop by. The Melanated Mental Health Awareness team, we got some really good people, folks, who really know what they're doing, and I couldn't be more proud to be a part of this. And I thank the Most High every day for each and every one of you, because without you guys, this wouldn't even be possible. Before we end this conversation, I just want to give each one of you a chance to give a thought. I know it's a lot to digest, a lot of people on this panel, so everybody couldn't just really just give everything that they had. So, I'm going to start with you, Afia. You've been the most quiet tonight. So everybody just, give your closing remarks, your closing thoughts, and that way all hearts and minds are satisfied.
Thank you. It's a powerhouse of women here. So I was learning and listening, and every time I tried to jump in, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. No, but I appreciate being a part of it. And I think I was sitting here having flashbacks of all of the microaggressions that I've experienced, and choosing to go into business for myself at such a young age because of those experiences. And then still identifying that even in business for myself, I still have to endure some of those things. So Closing remarks, I would say, is to remember that just because it's called a microaggression doesn't mean that it's something small. It's very impactful. It affects us majorly. And so we have to look for allies. We have to look for people who are there for us. We have to take care of ourselves. Self-care is important in the aspects of having to deal with that day by day at home. If your family kind of put some of those microaggressions on you, which we didn't get to jump into today, but we know that that happens at work, at school, in the grocery store. Don't take light of it just because it's called a microaggression. You need to pay attention to yourself, how you're experiencing it, and how you're taking care of yourself as you are experiencing those things.
I'll go ahead and jump in, and I kind of feel I feel the same way with you. I've learned so much even just being in these conversations, and just to say it publicly to you all of how much this is even healing for those that's even in the midst of these conversations, because all of us don't think that because we're sitting on this panel that we ain't been through it. So I'm definitely appreciative. The final thought I want to give is around resources, around if you feel like that you've experienced what are some things that you can do if you feel like that is thing. So the first thing I just want to tell people is it's important to educate yourself on the policies and procedures of your employer or whoever you are in an organization with, or whatever the case is. There is a distinctive difference between private sector and public in terms of who is ultimately responsible for that employer or that business, where they getting their money, things of that nature. That can definitely disseminate how things need to be handled in terms of reporting processes. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw out there for everybody. Also, if you are working for somebody, know your employee rights. I know when people go through HR processes, we're so excited we got that job, and we just get all this tons of aggression, or you're dealing with some type of discrimination at your job. Take this opportunity to go through and kind of look at what their policies are. There are equal opportunity employers. If they say that they are that employer, then they have processes and people that they have to answer to. Two resources in the community: the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU. There are offices in most major cities. Google it, find out what's in your city. This is an organization that is around protecting people's rights. And there's been a lot of, back and forth in terms of when you talk about protecting people's rights, what organizations are you protecting and things of that nature. But their role is to be of a protection and be of an ally and a resource to you. Most of these organizations have lawyers, like civil rights lawyers, and people that you can kind of talk through what are your rights and responsibilities and how can you navigate if there is something that maybe just need to be handled at the employee level or need to be gone up to maybe a criminal level or things of that nature. The other resource is the Urban League. Again, most major cities have an Urban League as well. I know a lot of these civil rights organizations, people have differences, particularly with generations. Maybe they're not aware of what kind of things they can do, or maybe being a member of these organizations. But I would definitely say your knowledge is power. Period. Don't think that having formal education makes you knowledgeable. You being able to have the opportunity to go and research and do your own, get your own information about your employer and organizations and businesses you patron are important. Know that you can report. Know the Better Business Bureau, all those things. Just make sure that you research, and just thank you all again for listening.
I'll go next. I am so excited to have joined, and y'all, like, I can listen to y'all all day. Like, y'all have such great insight, and I'm just so honored to kind of have shared this space with y'all, and thank y'all for the work that you're doing in our community around mental health and education. We definitely need it. The thing that I would kind of leave with people is it's not up to us to do the oppressor's work. It is up to us to take care of ourselves, though. It is definitely up to us to take care of ourselves, and we have to, I'm going to piggyback on a theory, is we have to do the work of taking care of ourselves and setting boundaries as a part of that work. making sure that you are knowing your limits and how much you are exposing yourself to these things and what they're taking from you and how they're depleting you. Because we don't even recognize that there are microaggressions on social media all day. And that we'll continue to allow that stuff to be downloaded in us. So by the next morning when we wake up for work, we're already at a level 9, and we have to be taking care of ourselves. We don't take so operating out of a space of using the reserves that we have, but that we're actually kind of showing up as full as we can, because this stuff is exhausting, like we talked about at the beginning of this live. Like it's exhausting, and you have to replenish yourself, and you can do that in community. So it may be helpful to find community where you can actually vent to people who look like you, people who are having the shared experiences, because healing circles are definitely healing. There's something about being in a circle of people who are having the same experiences as you, being able to share, that definitely has a healing component. So I love that. And if you making sure that those spaces are safe and not toxic as well, and that you do have a voice. One thing that I like to leave with people is two ways that you can take care of yourself that I think are highly underrated is breathing. So doing breath work, slowing down your nervous system and taking yourself out of the mode of survival that we're always in just naturally, but getting control of your nervous system so that you're acting from a place of at least as calm as you can get. I tell people we all carry anxiety in our bodies, but instead of us operating with an anxiety level of 9 all the time, maybe we can bring it down to a 4. Because from that place, we can operate from a place of rationale a lot of times. And we're not running solely on emotion and scarcity, but we're actually able to make decisions at moments that we need it, and we're able to strategize better. Also, stretching. We really kind of like look over the work that stretching can do to move energy in and out of your body. So if you're stretching, we carry tension. I carry it in my shoulders. I carry it in my jaw. So I have shoulder pain. I have pain back here in my neck. We don't do anything about the and then they lodge themselves in places in your bodies, your hips, your joints. And so if you're prone to arthritis and you're prone to inflammation, you can actually have some of these things become exacerbated: back pain, knee pain, all of these things. And stretching, walking, you don't have to do crazy things, but just actually moving your body and moving that energy can help you take care of yourself and help you to kind of release some of those things that may be stuck inside your body, so that you can have more room to face the next day, because we're all out here just trying to do that.
Well, I will go next. I'm going to say, Dr. Ebony, I have got to get some of those cards, because I was already sold. But then when you told me that there was an emotion wheel in there, I love those. I love using those with clients, and I just think it's important for all of us that, the education about all those things. And so, yeah, you've got me sold on that. So some of my last thoughts are just kind of short and sweet. And, I want people to know just to trust yourself. Trust your instincts. If you think it is, it probably is. If you think you're being invalidated, if you think that there's some sort of insult taking place, or, any sort of microaggression, any of the types that we've talked about, then it probably is. And, and like Dr. Calibri said earlier, don't be ashamed about, thinking that, hey, did I think this? Did I think that? Is this true? Is this right? And just and use that going forward as a means of encouraging yourself and building up your courage. Environment around you, and know it's a good supportive space for you. And I think that, a lot of times we don't take into consideration with our world of work kind of, what's a good environment, because it's a lot of stress, right, to have to already take care of a household financially. So you're adding that stress on top of it. And so, like I said, just be aware and use your instincts, trust your gut, and all of that. So yeah.
I just want to say that it's an honor to be a part of a group of women who are so intelligent, but in tune with the needs of the Black community. It's one thing to be educated, but then it's another thing to understand what the needs of your community are and use that to push us all forward. So I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to be a part of you guys, and I thank you for all the work that you're doing. As far as the last comments, if you have been the recipient of microaggressions and they are becoming something that is unbearable, make sure that you are keeping documentation, whether that's going to HR every time it happens, or creating an email account where you literally send yourself an email and document who said what and when, what your reply was, what their reply was. Make sure that you are keeping documentation. So if you need it, you will have it. And you from a place of emotionality, you'll be coming from a place of facts so that you can get done what you need to get done when it comes to your employment. The other thing is that I think that's very important is that you check in with your children. You talk to your children on a regular basis about what they are experiencing, how things are going at school, what people are saying to them, because if you don't talk to them, they may not feel safe enough to just come to you. So you have to create the environment where talking is normal, and when things happen, they can feel free to talk to you about it. Once you've gotten that information from them, you get calm, because I know we can come out and be bears when somebody messes with our babies. But get calm and get to a place of facts again, and go to whatever administration you have to go to. Go to them with facts and make sure that you advocate for your child. So those are my 2 points. Advocate and document, so you will have legs to stand on when the time comes.
Let me just end this by saying, again, I want to thank each and every one of you, for doing this. Adrian, Deshara, Dr. Ebony, Dr. Calibri, Afia. I really do appreciate, y'all laying it out like this for everybody. May was Mental Health Awareness Month, but for us, every month is Mental Health Awareness. It's something that's just been overlooked and bypassing our community for far too long. So we here trying to fight all of that shit, fight all the stigmas, all of the negative connotations of around mental health. And, thanks to you guys, we actually have a vehicle in order to do that. So again, I appreciate, each and every one of you. Um, and to those who are watching, I thank you for tuning in. And I hope you guys learn as much as I learned, from them, because this is a very rewarding experience. And again, this is something that we need. And these professionals, these ladies, they spread the gospel tonight. They was preaching tonight, and they preach the word. And this is the part of the word where I step in and pass the collection plate around. So for those of you who are followers of our page and interested in helping us keep this movement going, I implore you to support us, not only in likes and shares, but in the words of Dr. Umar Johnson, donations. You can find us on Cash App. It's $ for Black with No Chaser. You can also find us on PayPal. It's PayPal.me/Black with No Chaser. My name is Tyrus Kennedy. You can mail it to me. I take checks. Cash App, PayPal, whatever. But seriously though, everybody has their own propaganda machine that talks about, their needs and their desires and their wants. And I think, we need our own, and Black with No Chaser is that. It will be that, but we need you guys' support. So again, help a brother out, hook us up. But in all seriousness though, we really do this for our people, to support our people, to teach our people, to help our people. And it's an honor and a pleasure for me to be a part of it. And, I love it. And I love each and every one of you. So on behalf of Adrian Marshall, on behalf of Deshara Dobb, on behalf of Afia K, on behalf of Calibri Jenkins, on behalf of our special guest and creator of the My Therapy Cards, the only therapy deck for women of color, Dr. Ebony Butler, on behalf of myself, TK, and all the Black with No Chaser, I really and truly appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we look forward to our next Melanated Mental Health Awareness conversation. Thank you.
Do I feel my voice is heard? It really depends on the environment.
I oftentimes feel like my voice is overlooked because of my skin color.
I don't always feel heard, but at Black with No Chaser, I know that my city,
Femininity,
opinion,
ideology,
queerness,
culture,
status,
perspective,
hair,
and my background
is safe here.
is safe here.
is safe here.
is safe here. Black with No Chaser, a platform made by Black creators for unapologetic Black content.